Hello, and welcome to this episode of Audit Oblivion. Today, we're discussing the top 5 most corrupt U.S. police officers of all time. While police corruption is a pervasive issue across the country, these 5 cases truly stand out. As always, if you find this video informative, consider leaving us a like, and if you do not follow the channel, please subscribe. Without further ado, let's get started. Coming in at number 5, we have Louis Apollo and Steven Kua, two former NYPD officers convicted of racketeering, obstruction of justice, extortion, and 8 counts of murder and conspiracy. They worked for the mafia while serving in the police force. The pair of corrupt law enforcement agents were known as the Mafia Cops. They worked for the Lou Casey and Gambino crime families. In 2005, both were indicted on charges of racketeering conspiracy, including murders, kidnappings, and money laundering. Both were convicted in 2006 and sentenced to life imprisonment in 2009. They were incarcerated and both died in prison during the late 2010. At number 4, Joseph Mianowski, a Chicago police officer who ran his own drug gang and was convicted of 10 counts, including drug conspiracy and racketeering. Joseph Mianowski was sentenced to life in prison for racketeering and drug conspiracy. He was known as Chicago's most corrupt cop due to his involvement in a cocaine sales ring with street gang members and other officers. During his 22-year police career, he received 59 citations for valorant arrests, but also leaked undercover police officers' identities, extorted protection money, and supplied gang members with ammunition. Mianowski was convicted in 2001 and is currently serving life at Federal Correctional Institution, Pekin. His conviction led to the breakup of the department's anti-gang crimes unit. In 2022, murder convictions of Juan and Rosendo Hernandez were thrown out due to claims of framing by Detective Ronaldo Guevara at Mianowski's request. Number 3 takes us to the LAPD, where David Mack and Raphael Perez worked together for the Rampart Division. Both were later implicated in the murder of rapper Notorious Big and involved in various corrupt activities. Let's start with Raphael Ray Perez. Ray Perez is the corrupt LA cop who inspired the movie Training Day. Ray Perez was the officer at the center of the Rampart scandal. In 1998, he was arrested for stealing cocaine from a police evidence room. After his trial ended in a hung jury, prosecutors traced more drug thefts to Perez. Faced with the mounting evidence, Perez cut a deal with prosecutors in which he agreed to testify about police misconduct in exchange for a 5-year prison sentence. After reviewing more than 1,500 arrests, Perez identified 91 problematic cases, from bad shootings to fabricated evidence, most involving himself and his partner Nino Durden. Ultimately, Perez implicated 70 officers in criminal or administrative wrongdoing. As a result, nearly 100 criminal convictions have been overturned and millions of dollars in settlement suits have been paid out. A former partner of Ray Perez, LAPD officer David Mack, was convicted of the November 1997 theft of $722,000 from a Bank of America branch in Los Angeles. 2 days after the bank robbery, Mack took a gambling trip to Las Vegas with 2 other police officers, including Raphael Perez. In the course of investigating the bank robbery, detectives developed leads that caused them to believe at the time that Mack was a possible suspect in the 1997 murder of East Coast rap star Biggie Smalls. Mack is currently serving a 14-year sentence and has reportedly claimed association as a Pyro Blood, an LA gang with ties to Death Row Records. At number 2, John Burge, a notorious figure in police brutality. John Graham Burge was an American police detective and commander in the Chicago Police Department, notorious for his involvement in police brutality and torture of at least 118 people in police custody to force false confessions. Burge was born in Chicago, Illinois in 1947 and died in Apollo Beach, Florida in 2018. Burge served as a U.S. Army sergeant in South Korea and Vietnam before becoming a city police officer. He began his career as a Chicago police officer in the 1970s and ended it as a commander. Following the shooting of several Chicago law enforcement officers in 1982, the police obtained confessions that contributed to convictions of 2 people. However, one of the victims filed a civil suit in 1989 against Burge, other officers, and the city for police torture and cover-up. Burge was acquitted in 1989 due to a hung jury. In 2002, A 4-year review revealed numerous indictable crimes and other improprieties, but no indictments were made against Burge or his officers as the statute of limitations for the crimes had expired. In 2003, Governor George Ryan pardoned 4 of Burge's victims who were on death row and whose convictions were based on coerced confessions. Burge was charged with obstruction of justice and perjury in 2008, relating to testimony in a 2003 civil suit against him for damages for alleged torture. He was convicted on all counts on June 28, 2010, and sentenced to 4.5 years in federal prison on January 21, 2011. Burge was released on October 3, 2014. Burge's actions led to increasing reports of torture and new civil suits. He was also involved in abuse-related legal decisions, civil suits by pardoned men, special investigations, in a culture of violence. The city of Chicago paid millions in reparations to the victims of police misconduct. Burge's actions also led to legal changes, including the Torture Inquiry Relief Commission. John Burge's actions will forever be remembered as a dark chapter in the history of the Chicago Police Department. Lastly, at number 1, we have Robert Gisevius, Kenneth Bowen, and Anthony Villavasso, who were members of the New Orleans Police Department during Hurricane Katrina. They were convicted of first-degree murder for killing an unarmed innocent teenager and falsifying reports to cover up the shooting. Prosecutors had argued that Mr. Bowen, Mr. Gisevius, Mr. Villavasso, and Mr. Falcon had raced to the bridge on Sept. 4, 2005 in a truck, responding to a distress call from another officer. Some of them were armed with assault rifles, while others had a shotgun or a semi-automatic pistol. Prosecutors said that the officers immediately opened fire on members of a family who were walking to a grocery store in the largely abandoned city. The officers shot James Brissett, a friend of the family, multiple times, killing him and gravely injuring 4 others. The officers continued to fire even as the family members raced to safety. Several of the officers then chased Ronald and Lance Madison, 2 brothers, who were on their way to check on a dentist's office that belonged to their oldest brother. Mr. Falcon shot and killed Ronald Madison, a 40-year-old intellectually disabled man, in the back with a shotgun and stomped on his back as he lay dying, prosecutors said. No guns were recovered at the scene, and witnesses, both officers and citizens, testified that the victims were unarmed. The cover-up began immediately, prosecutors said. Several of the officers gathered in an abandoned police station to make sure their stories were consistent. Prosecutors argued that Mr. Kaufman, who was charged with investigating the shooting, instead helped lead the efforts to hide what happened. He was sentenced to 6 years. But setbacks for the prosecution quickly accumulated. A federal judge, citing prosecutorial misconduct, ordered a new trial for the 5 officers, who ultimately pleaded guilty and received significantly reduced sentences of 3 to 12 years. According to prison records, Mr. Kaufman and Mr. Villavasso have been released. Mr. Bowen, Mr. Gisevius, and Mr. Falcon remain imprisoned. In 2016, New Orleans announced a $13.3 million settlement over 3 major police brutality cases from the weeks before and after Hurricane Katrina, including the Danziger Bridge killings. As a society, we must continue to work towards ensuring that law enforcement agencies are transparent, accountable, and committed to protecting the rights and safety of all individuals, regardless of their race or background. We would love to hear your thoughts. Please take a moment to like, comment, and share your thoughts below. Your engagement helps us to continue providing high-quality content and investigative reporting. Thank you for watching Audit Oblivion.